Good to go? Might be on? Okay. So welcome councillors and welcome members of the community who are viewing in on live stream. I'd like to begin the meeting by formally acknowledging the Drumble people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Councillors, this is a special meeting of council to consider two reports today. One in relation to a request from Central Queensland Coal for a letter of support, and secondly in relation to a request from officers for approval of capital expenditure for the hub. So just noting a full attendance, councillors, and we have in attendance our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Cale Dendell, and Mr. Brett Bacon, the Executive Director of Livability and Wellbeing, in the room. So there's no leave of absences or apologies, councillors, no declarations of interest in the matters on this agenda. That was a question, he says, with a rising inflection in his voice. Public forums and deputations nil. We're not considering business arising or outstanding from previous meetings. There are no petitions for item 7. There are no councillor or delegate reports. There's nothing from the Audit, Risk and Business Improvement Committee. So we'll go straight to the reports, councillor 10.1, and I'll hand over to the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Dendell, to present the report. Thanks, Mr. Dendell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item before you is a request from Central Queensland Coal for a letter of support to the Minister for the Environment, Great Barrier Reef, supporting the development of the Central Queensland Coal Project, which is supposed to be located near Ogmore to our north. Councillors have recently heard from a small delegation from the proponent who are approaching the end of their approvals cycle following a number of years in development. The proponents have relayed to us their timeline and the project benefits that are outlined in the report, and they tell us that they're subject to receiving their approvals. They're ready to get construction underway in mid-2022 and employing up to 250 people during construction, with opportunities for employment for people resident from the caves to the northern part of our shire, up around the Ogmore area where the mine will be based. I won't repeat the highlight points that are shown in the report, other than to say that the federally appointed independent environmental review committee has signalled to CQ Coal that they have some reservations about the bona fides of the project, and have signalled that they will be recommending against. And if that is accepted by the federal minister, then that doesn't augur well for the continuation of that particular project. Hence the request for council to signal its support alongside others for what's considered to be a pretty important project for the district.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Any questions of the CEO before we go into debate?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The report lists yourself as the author, so is this an officer's recommendation or the Mayor's recommendation?
It's actually, I wrote the report, councillor, simply because I was the one most au fait with the information coming from Central Queensland Coal, but it would be an officer's recommendation.
Okay, so if that being the case, and I appreciate the transparency that provides, can I ask what are the grounds upon which we're looking to, so there's the recommendation there, but it doesn't really list any grounds under which why we're providing this letter. Just seek some advice.
Happy to respond, Mr. Mayor. It'll be principally around the economic and employment opportunities that presents for the northern part of the Shire. Certainly acknowledging the council's not the regulator in this instance, and certainly won't seek to replace the roles played by federal and state agencies in that regard. But having heard from the proponent about the lengths that they have gone to satisfy themselves and the regulators of the bona fides of the project. The recommendation reflects acceptance of that from the proponent. That's not our role, as you know, but certainly the representations to be made to the Queensland Government will be principally around the employment and economic benefits.
Any other questions, councillors?
You visited the site, didn't you, Mr Mayor?
Yes, I did, councillor.
Yes,
Yeah.
and your thoughts about what you saw?
That's probably a matter for we can discuss in the debate if you'd like, councillor. I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, question just to the CEO, through you, Mr Chair. Just to bring me up to speed a little better, I was not in attendance at the deputation recently. So has the federal government commissioned an environmental report, and the findings of that are not overly glowing? Is that what's come through to Carl, Mr CEO?
The independent committee, so there are joint federal state environmental approvals that are granted. The independent environmental committee commissioned as part of that process did raise some concerns around the conclusions drawn by the proponents' own consultants, and I guess there's been some an opportunity for the proponent to respond to those things, but the committee has signalled that it won't be in a position to recommend support on where it finalised its conclusions.
If I just could follow up another question. So at this point, the committee, do they get asked to respond to the applicant's counter arguments, I guess, which would then, I guess, help people like us better understand the magnitude of the independent environmental committee's position?
I can perhaps respond to that if that helps. My understanding, councillor, is that the deadline of this Friday is for this case to be considered by the Honourable Megan Scanlon, the Queensland Minister for Environment and Great Barrier Reef, who I understand will be the final decision maker in this matter. So Central Queensland Coal will put their case to Ms Scanlon, and she will obviously consider the report from the IESC and then make her decision based on her deliberations.
Okay.
Did you want to move it, Mr Mayor, being the author?
Not necessarily, councillor, but I'm happy to move it.
I'm happy to move it. I'm happy to see you're the author. I thought I'd give you the chance, otherwise I would have.
All right, no, well, I'm happy to move it, councillors. Can I get a second? Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Mather. Right, we're in debate now, councillors. So in response to Councillor Mather's question before, I have been on site. I was invited on site after our meeting at Ogmore when we handed over the fire appliance. It was just a cursory inspection of the site to see what it looks like. I was shown the map of the proposed site, explained the issues, and essentially the meeting was very short, and it was following that I suggested that they perhaps come to council and provide a presentation to councillors to explain what they're proposing to do, what the issues were that they were confronting, and just sort of see where it went from there, councillor. So it wasn't a long meeting. Right. Anyone wish to speak? Look, I'm happy to speak for the recommendation, councillors, and I think, as the CEO has pointed out, from my perspective, this is worthy of a letter of recommendation on a number of grounds. I think, as it's outlined in the report, during construction phase, this mine will create 250 jobs, and as the proponents have outlined in their presentation to council last week, that workforce will be drawn predominantly from the Ogmore Marlborough Caves area, and will provide an opportunity to a lot of miners that currently work in that area who are working a significant distance further away. During the once it comes off construction and becomes an operational mine, they've indicated to us that there will be 167 full-time jobs provided to to local residents as well. Now, the opportunities here for Ogmore, Marlborough and to a lesser extent the Caves are significant because the company will be encouraging people to not only live in those areas but invest in those areas. So, when you have smaller communities like Marlborough and Ogmore, the economic benefits that this potentially provides are significant. Not only in terms of residential, but also in terms of commercial retail, because when you get more people, you get more shops. It's simple. So from that point of view, councillors, I think it's worthy of a letter of support. The other aspect, as the CEO has raised, is in terms of the environmental matters. The proponents provided us with a lot of support and a lot of evidence to show that they have mitigated the concerns raised by the investigative committee, and a lot of it related to leaching into the Great Barrier Reef. The technical studies that they've undertaken have shown that based on their construction techniques and what they propose to do, a normal cattle property will produce more than double the leachate into the Great Barrier Reef than their mine will. So for me, that was a fairly significant piece of information that we were provided with. Anyone speaking against the recommendation?
Just a question, if I can, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
And I guess the important or the relevance of the question for me is I don't have any environmental expertise to determine whether what the applicant is telling me is sound and totally accurate and completely valid. So is there any scope that what one could consider an amendment to this, that, providing all environmental concerns are mitigated through reasonable fair conditions that are within the authority of the relevant assessors of this, an application of this? In that way, I would think that provides some sort of protection, I guess, for council, which in trying to make a decision on something that they ultimately don't have any real knowledge or expertise on in determining, other than the applicant saying, hey, no, we can assure you that the cattle property's produced twice. That may be the case, I don't know. I'm not saying it doesn't, but is there any appetite to capture somehow the intent of that?
Look, I'm happy to entertain any wording, councillor, providing you can help me with that. Because you could perhaps couch it in the sense of saying that council provides a letter to the Queensland Minister for the Environment and Great Barrier Reef, the Honourable Megan Scanlon, supporting the development of the Central Queensland Coal Project near Ogmore, on the understanding that the environmental matters raised by the ISC have been mitigated, or something along those lines. If you're happy with that wording, councillor.
And I certainly, would appreciate others' input, but that would satisfy me. Absolutely.
Have been addressed.
Or something like that with.
Sorry, by the IESC. Environmental matters raised by the IESC have been mitigated.
Have been addressed, or mitigated or addressed, or are addressed.
Resolved.
Well,
Have been addressed.
Resolved could mean condition too.
the only interesting thing in regards to that wording would imply that we've taken the decision that they are mitigated. That's why we're providing a letter. So it says that we'll provide a letter on the understanding that they have been mitigated. So that would imply that we've made a judgment that they have been mitigated, which we're not saying that we're couching our judgment on the fact that the minister determines that.
Well, you're right. I think there's some ambiguity there.
Yes,
I read
yes.
it differently, but I understand where you're coming from. Yeah.
Or are, will be mitigated, or to be.
I think environmental matters will be raised by, will be mitigated. Does that you happy with that wording,
resolved.
councillor?
Well, it makes more sense of what Councillor Bella is trying to achieve.
Councillor Mather, as a second, are you happy with that wording?
Mitigate is not the word I was thinking of.
Resolved? Will be resolved
Yes, getting close.
or addressed?
resolved, I think,
Resolved?
because it seems to be a difference of opinion at this point in time. How does everybody feel about that?
I think this is one of those situations, as you know, councillor, where we get asked for a letter of support and it's got to come to the table. So,
We're getting better at it.
all right. Anyone speaking against the motion? I don't think I've got anyone against before. Anyone speaking for the motion? Councillor Mather, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is really exciting to have an opportunity such as this. You've got the chance of $8 billion export revenue, state royalties amounting to $760 million. Something like this just doesn't come along every day. There are issues, according to the IESC, that they're not satisfied with some of the environmental issues, and these have been contested by the company. And the company is stating that they haven't taken into account the latest tests and technical analysis. Now, I'm just hoping that the company has an avenue of appeal to put these matters forward, because the state and the Commonwealth can't turn their backs on a project that has the potential to bring so much wealth, not only to the country, but to our community. Our community and others like it, they're starving for this sort of injection. We can't turn our backs on this company if they're doing the right thing. And the final setup would be back with the IESC and the company to dispute that. They've got the opportunity for judicial review, I'd imagine. And if they're very certain about their environmental studies, they will take that line, because they've made a major investment so far to get this far. I attended a meeting in Marlborough, going back, it must be last year. The hall was full. There were people hanging out the windows. They were excited because they thought, thank God something's happening here. If any government turns their back on this possibility, if it's a goer, and I've no doubt that these people are sincere, this government doesn't deserve to rule. They've got to give them the opportunity to prove what they say they can do, and everybody wins. But if they reject this now, not only will the people not have any confidence in the government, I feel very sad for them, because this is exactly what they need. The federal government has taken away over a dozen of our cattle properties to the tune of $1 million, leaving us deficient in funding for our budget. They deserve to give us consideration here, that they can give us back something in return. And that's consideration. We don't want them to break the rules. We just want them to recognise that you can't keep taking from the people all the time without putting back. And this is something that these people have gone through. They believe they're credible, and I would hope they would be. I suspect they would be. And I do know a lot of people, certainly 150 local jobs, will be dependent on it. There are 150 people who may not have a job now. And that all adds to the economy. So I've got confidence in our council, I've got confidence in the region, and I've got confidence in the company that they'll come up with the goods to satisfy the federal and state government with all of their assessments.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Thank you. Anyone speaking against at this point? Anyone speaking for?
I'll just
Councillor
quickly,
Lynch.
it's all about, I really enjoyed the deputation when they came to the table. They're all above board. What gave me sound reason to believe they're doing the right thing was a scientist was in the room, and any questions that we asked her, she gave us feedback. So I feel very confident in regards to the environment. But most importantly, it's exciting to see that a small community can prosper from this, and I think it's all about that. It's all about the economic growth. It's about people being employed, and I think it just will make those little towns a lot more vibrant. The roster lifestyle for those employees is great. It's 5 on, 2 off, and they have intentions to really look after their employees, and I think it's absolutely 100% support this item.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch.
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Friend.
Yes, I also support this, and looking at any environmental impacts, this particular company has had 3 versions, and they do not want themselves to see any environmental impacts. So they're moving dams away from remnant vegetation. They're enclosing their conveyors so that there's no dust or air pollution, and they're not going to be. And they're not going to be working on the weekends, on the Sunday. Yes, that's right. And they're going to give people a lifestyle, and they're going to give people jobs. And we need to put this finance back into our community. It's imperative. So I am convinced, after speaking with them and asking many, many questions on the day, that they are attending to any environmental impacts, because they want this to go ahead. They don't want to cause any issues with the environment. And so I will also support this.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. We'll open the floor. Councillors, any other councillors want to make a comment?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, look, I thought it was a very good deputation, and I found there was a lot of sincerity in it. And it was, as Councillor Lynch mentioned, having the scientists there to answer questions was also great, even though I am aware that pro-development scientists might be a little bit different than a neutral scientist. So, and on that, I think it's very important that we've added that clause about the environmental matters, as I believe that the Great Barrier Reef is of concern, and so as long as those questions are resolved, then I'm all for it. So on that basis, I do support the letter.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Okay. Councillor Hutton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Confidence is an interesting thing, that we take confidence in the word of others, we take confidence in the reports that we read, we take confidence in the information provided by both independent parties, independent arbiters, scientists, experts and others. We also recognise that our community as a whole is split on the impacts of mining, both as a positive and a negative to the community, and I think that both of those things are items that should be considered in terms of the decision that we're making here today. I am going to speak against this request, not because I profess to have all the answers, but because I don't believe that I'm in a position to have all the information to provide a representative response on behalf of our community. In this matter, we are not the decision maker. That role is for the state and federal environment ministers respectively. I don't intend to contest the advice of the Independent Expert Scientific Committee on Coal Seam Gas and Large Coal Mining Development brought about by the Australian Government, nor the independent advice provided by the proponents through their experts, which they argue satisfy the concerns raised. At a personal level, I support progress. However, in my desire to see our community grow and prosper, I do not seek to dismiss nor offer an opinion on behalf of our community on something which I can't guarantee meets my obligations under the local government principles. I believe in supporting this motion, which would seek to influence the state and the federal governments to approve the mine in the absence of the full information, which, as the decision maker, makes the state government and the federal government best placed to consider these things in their entirety, that we risk being seen as wanting progress and development and the benefits to the community of Ogmore, to the benefits to the community of Marlborough, and acknowledging the positive contributions that a mine would undoubtedly make to the budget of Livingstone Shire Council each and every year. Are we an independent party to this, or do we have a vested interest in its approval? Now, I believe that there are definite benefits to the community, and they've been outlined here today. I believe that, the role of independent experts is to provide advice to governments so that when they are the decision maker, they can make the best decisions based on all the information available. We see that in our own role in planning, in terms of the planning scheme and approvals. This is the time for the state and federal government to seek the best advice they can from a range of stakeholders. Now, if this council wishes to be one of those stakeholders and provides their reasoning why it supports the development, that's completely up to this council. But I believe that we're better off as someone who has a role, both as an approver ourselves, but also as a stakeholder, acknowledging and allowing the process, whatever that process be, and I know that there's some conjecture as to whether they get to resolve this through a legal process or whether it's a matter of providing advice to the ministers prior to decision making, whether they get to contest each other's information, whatever that process may be for the state and the federal environmental ministers to deal with and manage it. And that way, not only do we not bring our community into potential disrepute, but we also ensure that our role continues to be independent.
Division, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, councillor?
Division, calling a division.
Okay. All right, thank you, councillor Hutton. I don't propose to wrap up on this, councillors. I think it's all been said. So speak to the motion, councillor. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow the speaker against there, I'll speak for this motion. Certainly take on board the very logical and sensible comments by councillor Hutton. However, I do have a different view on that. This is a chance for us to advocate primarily. We're not decision makers, we're not investing any money, but we can invest our decision making towards it to hopefully advocate the many positives that this could bring to the broader community. And I feel confident that we've underpinned that with the environmental matters to be considered by those higher levels, which are well above our capability. And I think the confidence that I can take is that Australia has probably or arguably the highest levels of regulation with the assessments of mines such as this, and even with the Adani mine that's probably been going for, I don't know, somebody might know whether it's 5, 10, 15 years. It's a heck of a long time. So these things don't get rushed into, thankfully. But if asked, do I support the development of a metallurgical coal mine, which is the highest quality coal perhaps in the world, which produces the best steel in the world? We've got the product to sell, and the world needs that product, and far better that they burn our product than some of the dirtier ones that are around the world. And so if there's a chance of this happening with the environmental regulation in place to protect and mitigate against those things, I'm confident that the higher levels of government can ensure that that happens. I don't feel concerned that they won't. I feel confident that they will, and I'm prepared to support it going ahead on those conditions. So I support the motion.
Thank you, councillor Bello. And I've changed my mind. I will actually wrap up on this one. Sorry, councillors. Look, I also acknowledge councillor Hutton's thoughtful and informed view on this. But again, I have a different view simply because we've been asked for a letter of support on this one, councillors. And this particular project has been bubbling in the background for a while now. And anecdotally and also informally, I think we've probably all moved within the communities of Marlborough and Ogmore in particular. And I haven't found one resident of those areas yet that is opposed to this. So, you know, we at the moment have a number of requests for letters of support, some of which we're seeking further information from our community on. But there is no doubt in my mind that the members of the Ogmore and Marlborough community would be supportive of this particular mine because it provides them with opportunity. And so on that basis, I accept councillor Hutton's view, but I also think that, you know, there's an opportunity here for those particular community members that they want to grab with both hands, quite frankly. So I commend the report to the table, councillors, and essentially we'll close debate and just go to the vote on this one, please. So councillor Mather's called a division, so all in favour, please stand. So you've got councillor Mather, councillor Eastwood, councillor Lynch, myself, Deputy Mayor Bello, and councillor Friend. Against, councillor Hutton. Thank you, councillors. Item 10.2, the hub approval of capital expenditure. And Mr CEO, we have Mr Bacon to present the report.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr Bacon.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report, councillors, is specifically relating to capital expenditure at the hub. If you go to the previous decisions section of your report, bring to your attention that in late 2020, Council made a resolution regarding negotiations around a prospective tenant for that building. Those negotiations are ongoing and are, whilst related to, still separate from this report. This report's a flow-on from a resolution from Council back in 2019, where it agreed that it would commit to funding the installation at the hub of air conditioning, ceilings and lighting to the ground and first floors, any dividing walls between tenancies if required, and external doors to any areas at the ground floor as well, which may be required. This is a flow-on from that. For this particular financial year, there was no capital allocation because at the time of the budget being adopted, the tenancies hadn't yet been decided. And so without that certainty, it was decided not to progress with an allocation. We're now getting to the point where there is some confidence that there will be a tenancy there. We're in negotiations with that particular tenancy or a particular tenant. That gives us the ability to know what it is that we'll be looking to do in the hub, which is air conditioning, ceiling and lighting to the ground floor only. This does not entail the first floor, and some external doors. So we're looking now from Council to agree to $200,000 towards that fit out. That fit out will only occur if a lease is signed. So Council won't actually go and spend the money without that lease being executed, because again, we don't wish to be doing something without a tenant being in that building. The costs associated with the $200,000, there will be a payback period associated with that. Obviously, we are looking at probably 6 to 8 years without going into too much detail, councillors, because again, those negotiations around the lease are still ongoing. We don't want to breach the confidentialities of that. However, it is not speaking out of school to say that you're looking probably somewhere around the 6 to 7 year payback period for that.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. If I have a question, please. The proposed outlay of $200,000 that you're requesting will come from the Capital Works program, I'm assuming?
Correct.
Whereabouts from the Capital Works program?
The precise location is not known at this juncture, but it can be stated that the adopted capital budget for this year will not be delivered in entirety, so it will come from that pool. So it won't be an addition to what was adopted at the beginning of the year.
Thank you. That was what I was looking for. Councillor Lynch?
Just a quick question. Should council approve the capital expenditure and the lease is secure, how long would that take before you get the tenant into the building?
Council, that will be dependent upon the availability of tradespeople and I guess the speed at which that tenant moves and how we negotiate the work to be done. Yeah.
Any other questions, councillors?
Yes, I'm concerned that we're sort of expending $200,000 and we don't have a budget for it, and we're taking it from somewhere we don't know where yet. Not the way we do business as a rule. And even though we might have the money there.
Your speaker, Councillor Mader.
I thought it was on.
Is it on? The red light on there, councillor?
Yes, it's on.
Yeah.
Yes, it's on. We don't know where it's coming from. It's not emergent expenditure. And I think if we don't have a budget for it, I think we have to declare it as
You're
emergent.
kind of in debate at the moment, councillor. So,
oh, sorry.
Is there a question?
Question, yes.
Yes.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
You're right.
Yes, no budget. There is no budget there, and that's my concern.
Right. And we'll note that for debate, councillor. Any other questions, councillors?
The only question I have, Mr Chair, is because I didn't fully hear the officer there in relation to the question about where the $200,000 is coming from. Could you just reiterate that?
So the capital budget that's been adopted for this financial year will not be spent fully. So this will come from the existing capital allocation. So we can't say it's coming from Project X or Project Y, but the total amount adopted for this year will not be spent and it will come from that pool.
From that pool. So we're not going to be required to sort of go or decrease the surplus in order to fund this. This will be,
No.
we've got money there somewhere.
Correct.
And it's about locating that in terms of its best usage, I guess, or the least impact wherever it was
So
previously sitting?
this is a consequence of the fact that the capital budget will not be spent in full for this financial year.
Okay, so we can draw it out of the capital budget. Okay,
And that will have no impact on whether we generate a
Yes.
deficit or a surplus.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors?
Yes, Mr Chairman. I note that we've got 3 submissions who are interested in the ground floor. I don't want to we've gone a long time without having anybody for a while, and to have 3. So my question is, can we go into committee to discuss those submissions at this point in time?
Well, I'm just wondering what the point of that is, councillor. This came to council
To see if
in an
there's,
earlier report.
to see if there's something that didn't need to be determined at this moment as far as outfitting those 2 floors go. Because if these people are going to be there when we do the budget, they'll be there when we do the budget. I'd rather see funding that's been approved for that.
Can I just add a little bit of information? These people are now on a time frame because they've received advice from their landlord that they are to vacate their premises very shortly. So they're looking to make a move as soon as they possibly can. And so they've asked us if we could accelerate our consideration of this matter prior to consideration of the 21-22 budget. So that's the need for the urgency on this one, councillor.
I've heard that
Okay.
sorry?
All right, any other questions, councillors?
I've heard that story before. Not that I'm saying it's not true, Mr Mayor.
No.
But I wouldn't like to think somebody else's circumstances are pushing ours out.
Okay, I've got a mover in Councillor Hutton. Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Councillor Bellow seconding. All right, Councillor Hutton, would you like to speak to it?
Only very briefly, Mr Mayor, to say that it's a positive outcome for the negotiations to have got to a stage where we have interested parties who are looking to move in. Even better to hear that we're getting to a point where we are now looking at what the fit out looks like and how it will accommodate both their business and obviously add to the network of businesses in the CBD. We know that by adding density, by adding more businesses, adding more visitors, more customers, what we actually do is have a flow-on effect to all the businesses around the CBD, and we're very lucky to have such a thing as the multi-storey car park to make sure that we have additional capacity to meet that need into the future, and I look forward to being there at the opening.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Councillor Mather, are you speaking against the recommendation?
Yes, yes, Mr Mayor. I really don't want to because I'm quite prepared to support it under normal circumstances. But I'm very itchy about approving something that A, it's not emergent and we don't know where it's coming from. It's not a good way to do business. And there may be money in the budget that's not going to be expended, but we haven't been told where that money's coming from, whether we can do without it. And whether there is any option to fulfil any of those dreams with the current budget for those expenditures. We don't know, and it's the unknown, Mr Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Mather. Anyone speaking for the recommendation? Councillor Bellow?
Yeah, I'll speak for it. And I guess just picking up on Councillor Mather's point there, I recognise her concerns about where is the money coming from. I hope that I can provide the best explanation that I can, and I believe the money's coming from the ratepayers through the rates that we've collected. That are contained in the budget currently, and it's our role as stewards of that budget to try and spend it as efficiently and as effectively as we can, and we believe, or I believe, that this is it complies both with efficiencies and effectiveness of that money to advance a leasee to be able to go into that building, considering it's been empty for so long. I think every effort we can make, providing it's underpinned by transparency and accountability. That money is in the budget, and we have the ability to spend that budget to the best of our abilities with the discretion that we make based on the evidence that we have before us. And therefore I'm very much prepared to support the $200,000 that will advance a leasee going in to that building in the centre of town. Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bellow. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Rees, will you speak for it?
Oh, I will just quickly, Mr Mayor, I believe that it is emergent, that we, it's been vacant too long, and that we need to do as much as we can to get a tenant in there. And I believe it'll be a good result from the amount of money spent for a long period of time.
We'll open the floor. Councillor Friend.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. 3 years of a vacant property, 3 years of nobody being involved and being part of the community within that area. If we can get a tenant into that particular property, it's change. And there's no progress without change. For 3 years, that building has been stagnant. And now we need that change. So I am for this. Thank you.
Councillor Lynch.
Yes, well, everybody else has. Absolutely for it, and just, just a bit of background, it's not uncommon for the landlords to do the basic fit out when it comes to air conditioning, lighting, doorways. Should this tenant not work out, I'm 100% confident that they will, and I wish them all the very best success. The building's ready to go for when someone else wants to move in, so absolutely support this, and best of luck with them.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch, and I'll add my 2 cents worth. I will support those 2 councillors in the sense that I agree with Councillor Hutton. Not only have we got a tenant who's prepared to take the whole floor, which wasn't the case with all of the applicants previously, from the expressions of interest previously, but we have a tenant who wants to take the whole floor, and then that will be a catalyst, as Councillor Hutton says, for further growth and expansion and I suppose attraction of shoppers into the CBD area of Yeppoon. So I will support this as well. So Councillor Hutton, did you want to wrap up?
No, Mr Mayor, I think everyone said it all.
Awesome. Okay, thank you very much. All right, councillors, we'll close debate and go to the vote on this one. Did you want to call a division, Councillor Mather? Okay. All right, so all in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. And given that's the last item on the agenda, we shall close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for our members, or to our members of the community on live stream, and we'll sign off